Hi, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes as people join, and I'll go through some welcome and housekeeping whilst that's happening. Welcome to this webinar on Mastering the Machine, Advanced Prompting for HEOR Literature Reviews. This is the first time we have used Webinar Jam, which is our software, so do bear with us as we're learning as well. But if you would like to ask questions at any point, please do so using the Q&A. So I think there's a chat and a Q&A, and I'll be monitoring the Q&A and putting questions to our presenters. We'll talk through the remit and agenda for the webinar shortly. Whilst everyone's still joining, I can still see a few joining. We will start some introductions. Unfortunately, we have not got one of our presenters here today. So Jade was unfortunately unable to join us for reasons out of her control. So unfortunately today, Kevin is going to be Jade. So hopefully it won't be too much of the same voices, but we'll hopefully change it up with some questions and things as well. So please do chip in. I'm Vicki Young. I am moderating today's session. I'm an independent systematic reviewer with over 15 years experience in HEOR. I've been using software for systematic reviewing for around a decade, and I've implemented software at previous consultancies that I've worked in during directorships. I'm a previous buyer of Nested Knowledge, and so I know the tool very well as a user. I've also got Kevin. Would you like to give a brief intro, please, Kevin?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vicki. And thanks everyone for joining. I'm Kevin Kallmes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Nested Knowledge. And I've been working for 7 years now to build technologies that support responsible AI and systematic review. And we've been really happy to see the progress, not only in tools in this space, but also in guidance for the space. So I'm really excited to jump in on both topics, what is recommended by the true experts in the field, and then also what Nested Knowledge has done to try to reflect those practices.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, let's try and move some slides along. So I want to give you a little bit of remit for the webinar today. It's been designed for those who have a really strong understanding of literature reviews, so systematic reviewers, information specialists, or those who are in the HEOR and medical affairs fields who might commission systematic reviews. You might have less of an understanding of how to use AI prompting specifically for data extraction, or even how to use software to do data extraction. For many people here, I would imagine that you use systematic review software already, but you mainly use it for screening and not so much for data extraction. So if that's a gap for you, then this webinar hopefully will teach you something and you'll take something away. So we're going to first of all go through a bit of context around the RAISE guidelines, which is obviously our gold standard as it's emerging. We will then go into AI prompting as a skill for HEOR professionals and why it's a skill and not a button that you use on AI. It's a language to learn, essentially. And then finally, we'll go through some AI-assisted data extraction in Nested Knowledge using the adaptive smart tags feature, which is the data extraction feature. And we'll go through some effective prompting and some not so effective prompting and give you examples to hopefully get you started if you're not already using that. Okay, so setting the context. RAISE have updated in 2026. So they have three, I'm sure many people will be following the RAISE guidelines. There's 3 documents there for distinct roles, which are carved out. So evidence synthesists, so systematic reviewers, methodologists, AI tool developers, organizations, publishers, funders, users, and trainers. Raise 1 is really tailored around the recommendations for practice for each of those roles. And then Raise 2 is much more around how to build, validate, and evaluate AI tools for evidence synthesis. So that includes emerging performance metrics, evaluation methods, and transparent reporting. And then Raise 3 is more sort of how to assess, select, and use AI tools in a specific evidence synthesis setting. So that includes things around the ethical, the legal, the regulatory considerations, and the current tool landscape as well. So what is required by systematic reviewers and HOR professionals? How does Raise relate to us? I think the key messages that I take from Raise is that while AI holds really good promise, it's not a hypothetical situation anymore. It's something that's happening. It has got promise to improve the timeliness and the cost effectiveness of evidence synthesis, but it does also present challenges which we need to be mindful of and manage. So obviously evidence synthesis has been very carefully built on principles of rigor, transparency, and replicability. However, with systematic reviews being time consuming, it makes it very difficult to keep up with demand. So AI offers that opportunity to reduce this burden, but the offset of that is sort of monitoring and managing the risk to the rigor of the evidence synthesis process. So Raise clearly aims to ensure that AI becomes embedded within evidence synthesis, but that the core values of the discipline remain intact. So just on this slide, which we will give you to take away, there's some kind of key call outs of the principles from Raise. So systematic reviewers must remain ultimately responsible. We must declare AI use in data extraction. We must justify every use of AI, and we mustn't treat it as a knowledge base. So that all points us towards, very much towards human oversight. I think this is the last one on Raise, and then we're going to move into AI prompting as a skill. So Raise makes some really excellent points about the ability of AI to conduct data extraction. It's really as important as a systematic reviewer to know what we are working with. It's something that we're all still learning about. My favourite thing from this is that data extraction is the hardest task to achieve, and I love that Raise have acknowledged this. It's really hard to get high levels of accuracy with human reviewers, so it's going to be really hard to get that with AI. We've all been in that situation where we've got multiple reviewers. We issue instructions to those reviewers on exactly how to lay out data, how to extract data, but consistency between reviewers is still really, really hard. With AI, we aren't going to get the same output every time, just like we're not going to get that with humans. We can put in identical prompts, and on some data points, we will get different things from the AI or in a different format. That's not to say it's unreliable. It's just really important that we keep that human in touch. Secondly, it's really hard to evaluate how well the AI has done. There aren't any good objective measures to measure accuracy. We can't measure it on a particular tool and then go ahead and trust that tool implicitly. That human assessment is always needed. Third, we all know about hallucinations. We know that AI can fabricate data. And whilst things can be done to minimize that, as per point 2, we can't ever assume. We must have that human verification. And then finally, Raise gets us to think about the errors and the consequences of those errors that may arise from AI. So that's obviously a scale. There can be errors that are just mean 1 or 2 data points are wrong or lead to low quality data. And that may have little impact, or it can have major impact and lead to erroneous conclusions. So overall, the same message applies. We hear the term human in the loop, human verification and oversight, but this is giving us more context to actually what does that mean. I'm going to hand over to Kevin now to discuss AI prompting as a skill. hopefully you can move the slide yourself, Kevin.
Absolutely. And already seeing questions in the chat, and I apologize.
Yes.
Webinar Jam doesn't actually support captioning, so I think I'm just going to have to restrain myself from my normal speed talking. I will try to be as clear as possible, but do call me out if I'm causing issues there. And then before I move to actual prompting skills, I just want to express that the one of the most common questions I get is not how to use your AI necessarily. It's always how to use your AI responsibly or within guidance. And so I just want to thank the Raise authors for putting out there a clear guide. I would direct anyone who's looking to use AI in the systematic review space to read it in full. But also we have the summary in these slides. We will share these out to attendees. And I think that if you reduce it down to principles, the pieces that I feel like we were already aligned with those authors before before those guidances were released. Number one is that human in the loop. I think that the only true backstop in research is researchers, and I think that is going to be the case for the foreseeable future. The second is the methodological transparency that they call out, and we are obviously going to do our best within the platform to support that, but there's a responsibility on the reviewer. Like Raise is a guide for the reviewer, not for the AI, so make sure that methodological transparency is a part of your systematic review practice. And then the last piece is that at a very specific level, so very granularly, we love the idea that it has to be modular throughout the systematic review process where you are taking on each task and then you are having the AI trace decisions and provide things like accuracy statistics along the way. All of those to me are, let's just call them responsible backstops for AI supported review.
Awesome. I'll keep an eye on the chat. So feel free to, I'm going to interrupt Kevin with questions, seeing as we only have two of us on here.
Great. So this is directly from Raise. I did pull out that effectively when you are prompting, you are building a miniature tool. So treat it much less like you're, just going to your Claude or your GPT and typing in a quick question. Treat it more like you should zoom out and act a little bit more like you are engineering the output that you want. And that means you have to have some considerations in mind. You should treat this effectively as instructions to a junior researcher. There is a strong recommendation for iterative refinement. So create your prompt, run it, and then check it in some studies. And then only after you see that effectiveness, go on to use it on the rest of the review. Validate within the review. That's what I just noted on tracking the accuracy. And then, of course, document and trace everything along the way. Efficiency versus accuracy. I think of the human in the loop as the best middle ground between throw a question at an AI and see what sticks and doing all of the work yourself. My background, of course, is in pulling information from a PDF that's on the left of my screen into an Excel sheet that is on the right, as probably many of you have done. And I think of the human in the loop instead as being you have an AI take a first pass at things and you are either checking it or independently extracting. Really, you should set up the workflow that works best for you. At this point, and as an AI designer, I think that AI won't outperform you in most of the tasks here. So whether it's because of a miscommunication between you and the AI on your goal in an extraction, or simply because AI is still at that level in general performance, I would treat it very much as a pre-population or as a research assistant. Then today, I'm going to focus very heavily on data extraction, but I will say that all of this does go beyond the data extraction stage. We have AI in the system for search and for screening as well. And it is important to keep almost all these principles are aligned across all of this. We picked data extraction because we like hard problems. So we're going to be taking on the idea of AI augmented data extraction for prompting today. This is as simple as we could make it. Obviously, the Raise guidance is quite intensive, and the tool itself is a multi-step, systematic reviews, let's put it that way. Systematic reviews themselves are a complex process. We really tried to reduce the prompting process down to as simple of a linear process as possible. So draft your initial prompt, be specific about what you're looking for. If you have templated prompts, I actually highly recommend that you do this. And then whatever is working in one review, that you turn that into a template and use it in a new project. But repeat this then within that new project as you are proceeding with a specific review. Check it in a few studies and you should sort of quarantine those ones from the ones where you're just going to run the AI on the actual process, so you can track the accuracy of the AI against yourself in that validation set, reconfigure, refresh, and then really treat it like you need to instruct the LLM on how it should help you. So help AI help you. Once you're confident in moving forward, that's when you just jump into the full-on human in the loop. Okay. Moving from principles to action, we obviously have built a data extraction tool within Nested Knowledge, and so I'll be talking now more specifically about how to use our technology in this space. But I'd hope that the execution that we have is similar to what you might be practicing yourself if you're not in the tool. And I think that the way that we have taken on the data extraction problem is hopefully a reflection of all the principles that Vicki has just gone over. For those of you who are calling in from the other side of the pond, we did argue about the title of this slide. Apparently, the saying in the UK is "rubbish in, rubbish out." I guess I won this argument, but we all know that in a systematic review, the greater discretion is the greater part of valor. You want to ensure that at the screening stage, you're kicking things out that are irrelevant. At the data extraction stage, I think it's even harder because screening is just going to be, is a study in or out. Data extraction, it can get into a lot of the details of how authors report. There's the inherent problem of authors reporting things in a heterogeneous manner. So your subgroup reporting, your intervention reporting, dosing, even the outcome units that people are using might differ across studies. Time points always differ across studies. So there is a level of discretion in what you are willing to take in and what you harmonize in all of that reporting. So in your prompting, like what is we all know this problem. We have all dealt with the garbage in, garbage out problem. How do we take it on is the real question here. In the prompt stage, I think the most important thing is to think of what authors will report. I often say that prompting is less of an exercise in understanding the mind of an LLM and more of the mind of the author. So try to, and the refinement process can be part of this because you go and you actually read some articles, but think of how authors will report what you're looking for so that you can use the language, even the context and the structure that they are reporting it in, and make sure that the details that you're providing are reflective of not only sort of the guardrails of what you're looking for, but what they are actually reporting on your topic of interest. Hopefully any study that's included is going to report data in a manner that is at least sufficient for what you're looking for, but it will vary across studies. So you have to account for that in your prompting. I also am a huge fan of give a general prompt, like your first sentence in a prompt should be your general instruction on what you would like the AI to do, and then give specific examples and handle edge cases. For instance, if you're going to extract the mean muscle mass loss in a review of GLP-1s, which will be the example that I'm going to show in a second, you need to think about what are the units. You can even provide an example of muscle mass loss reported as a mean with standard deviation and kilograms. Give that as an example to the AI so it can seek to take the data and give it to you in the format you'd like, but also give examples of how authors will report things. So another example from the same, if you think that things like the interventions or the dosages will be reported with different words, you can always provide all of those as examples. So in my case, I could put Ozempic or Wegovy or semaglutide as an example of a reporting of the intervention. Edge case handling. You are always going to be making these decisions on the margin about what should come in and what should be out, or what should be considered the same or different when extracting. Giving prior instructions to the AI on how to handle those cases can be a great way to save yourself time in the actual curation process. Okay, how do we translate the language? How do we harmonize the language of systematic review to the language of nested knowledge?
Well, we have some questions actually. Oh. Can I jump in? Is that okay?
Please.
We have a question. So we have a question about formatting, about the user guide, not user guide, sorry, the reviewer guide. Can you upload your whole reviewer guide to Nested Knowledge? Or do you need, how would you get it to format and highlight things as required? So I guess we all know systematic reviewers will have like a big long guide. Can we upload the whole thing? I think the answer is no, but we can put that in, we can tailor it to the questions, right?
Correct. And so I'm sure that what is data extraction to you in your previous practice is tagging to us. And while data extraction might be a long instruction manual attached to an Excel sheet, for us, that is a specific prompt attached to a tag. So effectively, you can get it into the software, but I think you do need to go that one step further of narrowing the instructions on the specific tagging exercise. So rather than taking your whole guide and making that like a generalized background prompt, dissect it down to the elements that are going to be relevant to any specific nested knowledge tag. So I will say, why don't I write that down as well? Because I like taking feedback. I think that having the user give some general background, we do allow you to put in your research questions. So we allow you to say at the highest level, what am I seeking? But that's obviously content related, not structure or guidance related. So good question and something for me to remember. I'm seeing another question.
We have some other questions actually on two of the things, but I think they are mainly questions about how the AI decides things. So I think let's leave them. Let's see how we get some info into the AI and come back to those.
The more with these sorts of tasks, you might say at the high level, this looks like really straightforward, right? You just take the data out of the paper, you put it into a database, right? And then you get into the details and it's incredibly complicated. So I see the question about like which source material is prioritized by the AI, and that might be more nested knowledge specific. You might have your own practice for like, do I look at the figures or the text or the tables as the gold standard for what I extract?
We're getting lots of questions, so we're going to, just to let everybody know, just keep them coming in, and we will get through them.
We will have perfect. So how do you translate from the general data extraction practices into nested knowledge? As I just noted, a data point to you might be a tag to us, and tagging can be anything from a qualitative question like what was setting of this study to quantitative extraction like what is your muscle mass loss by arm, by subgroup, by time point. We have a couple of pieces that I've trained on many times. I see some super users in the chat. So probably this is where you get the most questions, and or from people who are jumping in on our data extraction or our tagging. A couple of things. We don't use sort of a Excel-based column approach. Instead, each tag is a standalone question or a question with a set of answers. And probably the most common user error I see early is not adding question types. We have very simple question types. Your single apply is going to be that free text answer, and then single select and multi-select are multiple choice questions with the answers below. That is something you need to think about, at least in nested knowledge, as an instruction to the AI on the format and options for your responses.
And I'm just going to chip in there, Kevin, to say that when I first heard, it doesn't work on an Excel basis, that really put me off nested knowledge. And I think I misconstrued that as we can actually get it to a really good Excel template. It's just that you have to, like this slide says, the data extraction, the structure is really important. So each tag I like to think of as a column header. So, I will quite often make my data extraction in Excel because I have to do that for clients anyway. And then I will translate that by putting a tag in nested knowledge for each header, and then adding those questions to tell the AI what to do with it and what to do on those data points. So I think I don't want anyone to be put off and think that we can't get an Excel output. We absolutely can. And it's something that I've learned in the last year. You can get really close actually to what we would deliver to clients.
I'd even say you can match one-to-one, at least with the column structure. There's always going to be that post-processing to put it in exactly what you want, but we can start from Excel, get it into the database, and then exit into Excel as well. So nested knowledge, the reason we do this is to have that living database where context is understood, but you can really think about it as one tag is one column in your Excel sheet. You can also, I think we have even more graded control of what goes into those columns. So when it comes to your contents, it can be numeric contents. It can be a whole table of comparative statistics. It can be text, or it can even be a dropdown of options that you pre-configure. So we want to give you that graded control where the AI is not allowed to go outside of those formatting instructions. So instead of that being something you just write up saying like, hey, make me a table, instead you would specify the table in the columns that you want. Everything in nested knowledge is hierarchical, or I should say everything in tagging, as in if you have a column header in Excel that is usually sort of standalone, it's not associated with all of its related tags or its related concepts. In nested knowledge, we have hierarchies where you're going to have a root tag like outcomes, and then you might have tags in between like safety outcomes, efficacy outcomes, and then your child tag where you're actually doing your extraction would be something like sarcopenia or muscle mass loss. That's our structure to enable both the LLM to understand the context of what you're extracting, but also allow you to organize your thoughts. And then exactly as Vicki said, I do find people are intimidated by the idea of transferring out of Excel and then being trapped outside of it. Everything in Nested Knowledge gets you into both a living dashboard and the ability to export into Excel. We also go one step further where we do help you summarize those outcomes. I think that is an exploratory capability and might be something that you may want to summarize all the results yourself, but we do give you an AI that can help you summarize, across dozens of studies what you've extracted. An example of those living dashboards, this is from the project I want to present today. We have interactive dashboards where you can have insights. Again, those are those exploratory first drafts of your textual outputs. All of those are traceable. We are very, very committed to hallucination resistance. We're never going to say that the AI is always perfect. In fact, again, we think that you are the only safeguard against AI mistakes, but we will always show AI traceability. So even when the AI writes something, it will trace you to the underlying data it takes this from. We also have some images that you can build into those dashboards, but you can see in the middle there are exportable Excel sheets where every tag can become an exportable column. So that simple translation, right? Every tag is a column, every study is a row, or every study. I actually think we should put every study arm is a row because arm level extraction is obviously extremely important for systematic reviews. This is what those look like when you get through to an output. So you take your dashboard, you export it into Excel. You may ask, like, why not just shoot me straight into Excel? The main reason is those are living dashboards. Nested Knowledge was actually founded in 2018 with the vision of living review and collaborative review and basically keeping evidence refreshed over time. And only, well, I will actually say we were building machine learning based extraction and screening technologies before GPT was even a word in the zeitgeist. But now that we're shifting toward AI-assisted living review, I think it's even more important to have those in living dashboards where you are able to keep track of exactly what is the current evidence. In Excel, we know is really it is a one-shot deliverable. So we try to give you both. We give you that one-shot deliverable, but we keep that living dashboard alive for you. Okay. What does our reflection of that raise process look like? It usually looks like building a tagging hierarchy in our software, running our adaptive smart tags technology. This is both internally and externally validated. I'm showing our internal statistics, but we do have a validations page where you can see external validations of this technology. Yet again, you can see not perfect. And probably if you have reviewers who have tracked their own junior researchers, they may be at something similar to this level. And it does, of course, require curation. That is step 3, as noted here. Prompt development. For us, a prompt is a tag, and that tag is made up of, well, let's just dissect a tag down to its component parts. Every tag has a name. This is your column header. This is fed to the LLM, so you should treat it as part of your prompt, but it also is how you keep track of what you're extracting. So in this case, you can see weight loss is the tag name. Question type, I've already talked about those on the previous slides. We support free text extraction. We also support the extraction of options. So this one is a typical apply. So that would be either build a table or give free text. We also have finite answers allowed. So if you wanted to pre-specify your interventions, for instance, you might do a select tag. The full question is really where you get to be as flexible as possible with what you're prompting the AI to do. You can ask it to report bullet points on a concept. You can ask it to report quantitative information on a concept. You can ask it to give exact excerpts and extractions from the underlying studies. All of those are supported as outcome types. I will say that part of it is going to be in the prompt. But if you want to think about the format of the output, you may need to go down to the advanced configurations where we have different content types. And the main ones that I tend to use are the text. So I want a textual answer to my question, or table if I want a study arm level quantitative extraction. And I think that I'll actually focus on those for today because I know that those are going to be the hardest types of prompts to get right. Those principles I went over on the earlier slides start with a general instruction to a junior researcher. include examples and handle edge cases, and give the AI instructions on the format of output. I've gotten feedback from people. They say, hey, I have to do a lot of post-processing. I just run the AI and then it gives me a full sentence. If you tell the AI the format you're looking for, you can reduce your post-processing of the outputs.
We've got there's one nice question actually about post-processing. This is something I do, so I think the answer is yes. Can you prompt the AI to convert or standardize units of endpoints? So for example, reported as pounds to kg, or do you have to do that post hoc? I know I was doing it with centimeters and millimeters yesterday, so I know it works for that.
Effectively, yes. So you should tell the AI. If you don't say anything, it will generally report as reported by the authors. But if you give it a specific instruction, it can transform units. I find this incredibly important for like time points, even as simple as that. Like time points are reported in so many different formats and methods. But yes, for units, even for if you wanted to standardize things like your intervention naming, because I know that I've seen so many Excel sheets where it's like intervention clean, right? They have 2 columns and people are doing post-processing to do so. You can do that in one step in the software. The nice thing is it will show you where it found that information. So you can sort of see the pre-cleaned version of whatever is reported. I know that tracing back to any transformed data is incredibly important in systematic review. So yes, yes, you can transform it and you can trace it. Amazing. And then the kilograms question was literally one that we're going over today. So that's amazing. I also see the most recent question is about like different document types. I will say that we were built for things like literature. I like to say literature plus, and I usually mean literature plus clinical trial reports, literature plus gray literature plus data on file, your clinical report before it goes live into the literature. You can push the boundaries. We've done a lot of testing of things like patient or physician surveys that are fully de-identified, FDA documents, HTA documents. I would say that you should follow this process for any of those literature plus, and then for any of these exploratory uses, honestly, that's a reach out and get support in how you might need to change what you're doing if you're extracting from something that doesn't look like a study.
Let's move back to the slides.
Yeah, sorry, I know. Keep me on task.
So we can see some prompts. It might be helpful. There's lots of questions. Yeah. We'll try and answer as many, maybe in a bit. Excellent.
So I think that we want to do a bit of a good, the bad, and the ugly on prompting here. You can go for something that is, I actually think AI is generally good with abbreviations, but you don't know if authors are good with abbreviations. So we always recommend write out diseases in full. You can provide both. We actually have an aliasing system where you can provide your acronyms or your synonyms on top of the main name for the tag. The other thing that we think about is try to give as succinct as prompts as possible. I often see people writing paragraphs of instructions for the AI, and every instruction does dilute the next instruction or the last instruction. If you are giving incredibly long or convoluted statements, think more in terms of formal logic or an instruction manual, right? You should be thinking in terms of an SOP rather than high level ideas. Think in terms of very specific instructions. I think the subparts of this we've already gone over a little bit on the previous slides, but just as examples, if you just make a tag and you call it study design and you don't put anything below it, it's not that the AI won't extract anything. It will just extract a sentence that gives you the study design, and then you will have to do that post-processing. And of course, you haven't given it any specific instructions on what you mean. So does that mean study type, right? Would that extract randomized controlled trial, or may it extract other information within the study? We can't actually tell you. You should tell the AI. Similarly, actually, this is a nested knowledge specific one. If you make a select tag and you don't give options below it, you are telling the AI to extract a blank list. So you're basically saying, hey, I have pre-specified a finite list of items for you to extract. 0, null. So I've seen that before. People said, hey, your AI doesn't work. It works based on how you both structure and instruct it. If you want something like the study design to be extracted into, say, RCT, prospective cohort, what I would generally recommend is specify it with a question and then give the finite options. And of course, even when it is as simple as like study design, you might want to give a brief instruction to the Just some other examples, and I'm actually going to jump into the software from here and show you some of the good, the bad, and the ugly in a GLP-1 muscle mass loss review. But just to give you some examples, you can extract geography, you can extract objectives, you can extract background information, sponsor, data sources. You can also do things like ask the AI to specify any of these within a quantitative extraction question. So if there's some stratification in the methods, and then there's going to be a subgroup related to that stratification, you can put that as an item in your study arm level extraction. Again, I know how complex quantitative extraction becomes in systematic reviews. We want to put the tools in your hands to structure and instruct the AI on each of those complications. I actually see a question that is a wonderful segue into our next piece, but it is, what can I tell the AI what to do in an uncertain situation? Like, hey, when unclear, do this. The one thing you shouldn't do in nested knowledge is tell the AI, if you find this concept, tag it this way. If you don't find this concept, tag it that way. Like putting in muscle mass loss and saying, if not found, still tag muscle mass loss. I've seen this before, and we actually instruct the AI just on general principle to not tag anything if it is not found. So if you make an outcome, you should not instruct the AI, hey, tag it this way if it's not found there. Do handle that edge case, right? That uncertain edge case where it's like, hey, is muscle mass loss the same thing as muscle atrophy? Tell the AI what to do in that edge case. If yes, tell it to tag it as muscle mass loss. That's sort of like the harmonization I was talking about earlier. You should think ahead about how authors are going to not align on how they report things, and think about how you want to handle the edge cases in those. Even something as simple as study type. We did a validation study on thousands of studies, and we couldn't believe how many edge cases we found in like, what is a study type? Like retrospective and prospective study designs, where you have previous data collection and then future data collection. It can be, again, there's almost no limit to the complexity of these extractions, and pre-specifying what you expect to need harmonization or to be an edge case. You should absolutely instruct the AI on this. Okay, some advanced tips here on just content mode selection. Really, it is, what do you want as your output? Do you want a set of finite options being selected? Do you want numeric information? Do you want tabular information? All of this is possible based on how you configure. And I have an example here, but I actually, I'm seeing the time, Vicki. I'm already falling behind. So is it a good idea to just jump into...
I want you to do the tables, because we have some questions about tables. If that's okay. So why don't you just talk about tables? Because for me, it's one of the most important features. When I'm writing a prompt, I'll quite often realize this should go into a table. So it might be good to talk about what a table is.
100%. And I have some examples to show in real life. And the upshot here is, I know that there's study level information, which should generally be tagged as text. And then there is ARM level information, which we would recommend using our advanced configuration of a tag table. We have online guidance on this. I believe we are sort of pushing the boundaries of specific prompts to the AI. We actually allow you to prompt on the column level within this. So you can actually prompt in a table like this on, what would you like the AI to report for the treatment arm? What would you like it to report for the number analyzed, for time points, for any of these outcomes specified? You can make a column and then also put a prompt below that column. This can be... Can you give an example of that? You know, what should I put in for each column? You know, how do I get the best out of it? So for treatment arm, I would usually say report the drug, or of course, if it's drug therapies, right? You got to be careful about these things. Report the drug or therapy given to patients with dose and dosing schedule. You could say, and then you give an example like this is more of a cancer example. So I could say pembrolizumab, and then say the weekly dosing schedule for that in like quotation marks as an example. Then for number analyzed, I would mostly say report as a number. Like, right, report the ARM population as a number. Time point, I would say report report all time points as, if I want it to be harmonized, as months. For ORR, I would yet again prompt on find objective response rate and report it for this ARM. Report as a number and a percentage at that time point. Those are the sorts of instructions you should be layering in. Again, these are not complicated prompts. I like to say that our prompting guide is like a page long, and your prompt should be much shorter than that. So don't feel like you need to write novels. And then the last instruction on this slide is really important. You should not feel like you need to do this in every study. you should template these. In fact, I think of a tag template as a prompt library. So if you make a template for your teams, you're always going to be able to use those, and you can just change one or two things about these, right? If it's a cancer review, you probably don't need to change almost anything in your tagging structure other than the disease state specific information or the outcomes that might be more specific. Obviously, overall survival, progression-free survival, overall response rate, those are going to be occurring all the time.
And that's, that's what I do now. I'm got to the point where with oncology, I am copying and pasting from my previous libraries, from my previous nests, as Nested Knowledge calls them. And we've just had a question actually come in just as you were saying that, which is really a coincidence, saying it would be really great to have reusable prompt templates for common fields, like study dosing population.
We provide those, and you can build upon them. So when you're, let's actually go and show this. Sorry, I'm just really, I'm all about, actually working in the software here. So if I jump over, can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Excellent. So I have a review. Actually, you can see this review. I built it on camera, so you can actually see how I built every aspect of this review in a forthcoming video. But I actually added a couple of examples of good, bad, and ugly prompts in my view. Let me jump out though and show you that templating. So if you want to use templates, jump in and you will be able to make organizational templates for your group. Obviously, I'm in the group Nested Knowledge, so I can see my own previous templates all the way back to things like AMCP, dossier templates. You should create and maintain these yourself. As you make better and better projects, you can make better and better templates by basing your new templates on existing work. We also have a wide range of public templates. We have an HTA template that you can build off of. These have our prompts in them, but yet again, do not consider us to be the world's experts on your research. We have built our tool. We've done a lot of testing in our tool, but I think that there's more thought needs to be put into what the authors are going to report than how we've built the AI system.
And it's probably really important to say, I never start with a blank nest now, ever. I always start with something from a template, and it might be worth just pointing out the copy and paste tool, yes, which you can literally directly, start with the template that best meets your needs. And then if you have a question type tag, I wouldn't even ever write it out from somewhere. I would just always edit a previous question because you can copy and paste them really nicely.
Yes, so templates for the high level, like full prompt library. But yeah, if I am making a new tag, I can quite literally copy the tag, just Control-C, Control-V, and I have taken my old prompt and put it into a new tag. You can even do that across projects, actually. You can copy in one project and paste into another. It's pretty cool.
We've got another... Another quite nice question about table tag content. I want to make a point of table tags because, when you think about a data extraction template and you think about the outcomes tab, typically I would have different tabs on Excel. I see those tables as really making up those sections. You always have, for example, in an oncology review, you have progression-free survival. They're pretty much the same, apart from, depending on the type of data, they're just chunked. So I really see the table tags as making those chunks. And like I said, I never start from scratch. So the question that we've got is, how important is it to create a specific prompt per column within the table tag? So you can maybe show this because you're on it.
I will show that exact one. It is less important if it's simpler data, but you can see what I put in here. I want the drug and the dose and the schedule. So I need to be, if I just said treatment, I'm not telling it exactly what I want. So it's mostly actually about your goals. The more specific your goals, the less you want to do post-processing, the more you should say. The more you're okay with the AI using its judgment on what you mean, the more you could just say treatment and so on. My strong recommendation is make prompt libraries in a structure that is what you want exported, because we will give you a spreadsheet that is at the level of all of your qualitative tags and also a separate sheet for each of your tag tables, or you can combine tag tables in an export. So we allow that flexibility, but if you're going to use a template, if you're going to use a prompt library, to me, it doesn't make sense to just type in treatment and then move on, because you can always just borrow from your past prompts. So if you're in a hurry, if you're in a hurry and you're doing more of a rapid review, is probably the only time I would avoid column level prompts. You don't need to repeat yourself though, right? It doesn't need to be treatment, extract the treatment is less necessary. Just to go over some of those, the bad, the good, and the ugly is the order I actually want to go. not that these are horrible, but that they actually are the sort of tags where you're going to need to do more work. So you can see I have extract sarcopenia, however it is reported, is you're just going to get an exact text segment. If you wanted to have any sort of processing on that, if you wanted to specify anything about that, you're going to need to do that only in your human in the loop post-processing. I would actually specify exactly what you want in this case. However, the tag name is correct, the question type is correct, we're good there. Quantify sarcopenia by arm as a mean and median. This is a good goal, but we just talked about tables. This is the sort of tag that would give you a text segment that will list out all that information. I know that's not what you want in your output, so you should change this to an advanced table mode and specify arm, mean, median, time point, and so on. Categories. I'm a huge fan of pre-specifying answers, but you have to think about how authors report things. If you want to know, in this case, I did like greater than 5% and less than 5% muscle mass loss. The AI actually can do pretty well in sorting those out, but you're kind of drawing an artificial line in the sand where the AI is going to have to do its best judgment on what goes into each of those categories. It's better to actually go to how authors report things and follow their conventions for any sort of categories that you're defining out. But none of those are horrible prompts. They're just not going to give you an output that you can just move forward with without spending more effort. So bad, I would put that in the category of more human in the loop needed. The ugly, sarcopenia, no description, no content mode selection, and most importantly, no question type. This is so ugly that the AI will skip this question. If you do not specify, either apply this tag or select subtags, the AI won't help at all. So this is the sort of question where you're going to think our AI is very unhelpful.
I've got a couple of questions that might be nice. We've got, what areas of extraction do you think require the most QC in your experience? That's from Andrew, who somebody must have trained you very, very, very well, Andrew, in the past, Andrew Easton. He's one of our guys.
Great question. And this is just my experience, but the most important is going to be that quantitative data a lot, because I saw another question I wanted to take on, which is, can the AI read figures? The AI can extract, we have a mode, actually, this is something that's exciting if you haven't seen this yet. When you're running the AI and you're doing it on full text, we do have a mode where you can turn on high fidelity, which will extract figures, but it doesn't digitize figures, right? It's not going to read the KM curve intelligently. It's going to extract numerical data where it's obvious from the figure. So that's also the most important, right? When you're going to your statistician, that's going to be the data that is going to, say, is therapy A better than therapy B with respect to outcome C? That's where I usually spend most of my efforts in terms of like deep dive on quality control. The only exception there would be for undefined background information about the study can be much more, you can always ask a very, very open-ended question and then categorize. For instance, this was a review that was across all disease states. And I did a previous review on GLP-1s to try to figure out where they're used. And it was really hard for me to specify like what disease state is being reported, because I didn't know from the start. So instead I did actually a refinement process. I asked the question as a free text. I just asked what disease states are reported in the study. And then I read what it brought back. And then I structured those into a select question. So there are strategies to address really open-ended and difficult wishy-washy questions.
In terms of the areas that need most QC, I would say that, I don't find a particular outcome or a particular thing more tricky. What I find is that there's areas where, and I couldn't call them out, but there's often times where I have to think about my prompt and go back to that thing of explaining it to a junior reviewer, and I've assumed knowledge that the AI doesn't have, but again, it's something that a more junior human wouldn't have as well. So
that's more about checking your assumptions, though, right? That's not a difficulty in the paper. Make sure you're checking your assumptions at the door, right? Treat the AI like a very, very diligent but naive researcher. So yeah. Just to keep trundling on, I want to get to some of the good. The other ugly, I did note this earlier, but make sure not to say what to do when something is not reported. Frame your question as positive. find sarcopenia. If it's not reported, it should just not be tagged. So avoid having sarcopenia not reported in here. I've had people reach out and say, I wanted it to say no in this case. If that is the case, like you wanted an affirmative that something is not reported, that's something better to have as an option or a sub tag. Don't tell it to apply a tag that it should not apply.
Yeah, so you can do that because like we will quite often want to put in not reported. So I quite often
Like
tell
buckets,
it and it will, but we make a category on this hierarchy that you're seeing not reported.
Exactly. Yeah, that's actually a little more nested knowledge specific. I don't want to say that's an ugly practice in general. That's just against how we've prompted the AI. Okay, some good. And you can actually create this structure that you see here with our pre-configured core smart tags. This is a structure where we are asking for the study type and we are giving it sub tags and we're breaking them down by the category. And then we're giving the exact details here. And we're telling the AI some examples that might be helpful here. And then the AI is going to give us both the tag and it's going to extract in the underlying study what the type is. Very straightforward. Let's call that a simple example. And then we have one, there was a question right at the start about, hey, can I bring in my whole guide? We have a data extraction guide on what to do in what situations. And I said, you have to break that out by tag. This is actually one that Vicki recommended and then ran, and it was successful. Inclusion criteria. You usually want those in bullet points or similar, and you don't want it to be full sentences. And it might be super extensive if not. So the prompt is summarize the inclusion criteria using bullet points. Do not write full sentences, separate bullet points. You can give those exacting instructions. So whatever's in your current data extraction guide, dissect it and put it into the tag prompts, turn that into a template, and you have now just reflected your entire data extraction guide to users in our tags. Again, I'm going to listen on whether we should try to have you add that to to sort of a background in the software, but you can actually do it at the tag level. So we allow incredible control at the specific tag level. I'm not going to say this is a perfect tag, but if you want qualitative outcomes, I think that you can always ask for things like summaries or extraction. Just be specific about how you would like the AI to do so. I asked it to summarize all safety reported outcomes related to muscle mass loss, sarcopenia. I'm listing those examples, right, of how to handle the edge case. Like is muscle atrophy the same thing as muscle mass loss? In this case, I want them to be harmonized and grouped. I've asked it to be concise, and I've asked it to break out quantitative differences where possible, because if that's what I'm looking for. But I did want to focus on good table practices because I know that I see a lot of active users on the call. So I know that probably a lot of you know 60, 75% of what we've said today. And then you're like, hey, give me table instructions. So if you are extracting arm level data, give a tag name, give a full question at that level. So ask, I want quantitative muscle mass loss by treatment arm and by time point. I'm going to say across treatments, extract the muscle mass loss. I give those other synonyms. I also tell it the unit types that I'm going to be using, and I say report as numerical data with units. And then for each column, I'm giving those instructions. There was the question, like, do I have to give column level instructions? It can be very helpful to give column level instructions because it's going to get you down to just saying semaglutide with the exact dose and exact period. Even things like number, you can give an example of what you're looking for. Extract the mean muscle mass loss and harmonize it into kilograms, right? So even if the underlying study reports it in pounds, this would be harmonized for you. And then I did the same thing for median and time point. I asked it to report it in months and gave it an example of how to report that. Then this, I actually ran this. I was working on this just earlier this morning, and I noticed that one of the studies that we were extracting, the AI actually, let me go to my study where this was extracted, and you can see it extracted this table, and it gave me, let's just expand this, it gave me muscle mass loss. And since I made a column for time point, but I didn't specify it to do it this way, the AI read between the lines that I wanted to report everything in one row by the time point and then say 6 and 12 months. So here it's giving me muscle mass loss of 3.37 kilograms at 6 months and 3.53 at 12 months. I did the process that we said you should do in the introduction here. I used that refinement process and I redrafted that table. I changed the structure a little bit, and I made a time point instruction that explicitly asked for a new time point, for every new time point to be made into a new row. And then I got exactly the structure that I wanted. I have the treatment, I have the dose, I have the number of patients, I have the time point, and then I have exactly what I asked for in terms of mean with standard deviation from the underlying study. So even just in this one table shift, you can see that my post-processing is reduced to effectively nil, as opposed to, in this case, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm going to make a new row, I'm going to type this data in. This is where that refinement process is so crucial. So you don't end up coming back to me and saying, hey, Kevin, I didn't save any time because I had to spend so long changing how the AI reported things. So just an example, this was not intentional. I meant to make a good example. And I obviously I didn't think about time point enough until I was able to go through that revision process.
I'm gonna interject now because we've got 4 minutes before people are gonna have to start dropping off to go to their next thing. I think it's really nice. You can see on here how the form tables, it might be really nice to just show how all those tables go together into a dashboard. And, we talked about if you've got an outcome tab on Excel, then you might want to try and recreate that with small chunks, which are those tables. And this is where you would do that. Kevin's showing us now the dashboard and all the different columns that you can put in. And then at the top right, there's a little Excel export. So, you can view some of the data on here. I quite often use dashboards to have a quick look through. I also quite often export the data so that I can do what I want to do on Excel, and then I sort of go back and forth. So I just want to kind of show where that data ends up, because when it's in those side panels, as a systematic reviewer, you just want to know where this data is going to go. That's what we always want to know. We've got a few.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Before we jump to questions, I just wanted to note that we do have that exploratory text summarization. So if you tag it, you can draft an insight. Those insights are fully traceable to the underlying data. This is something where the RAISE guidelines are very clear that, like, in-project validation and human verification are appropriate for things like screening and extraction. This is very exploratory. So if you're doing systematic reviews, this may be something where you want to do most of the interpretation yourself, or you treat this only as supplemental to whatever you are doing and you're checking it along the way. So it's present, but it is exploratory. We're trying to push the frontier of data extraction, but what we are holding ourselves to is traceability, and you are always able to go back to, for every sentence the AI writes, it will trace you back to the studies that underlie it. But let me unpresent and go to questions.
Well, actually, before you do that, it might be helpful on the point of QC. I was going to jump in and say that if we're doing a systematic review, this is augmenting the process. So I go back and I check every data point, and it might be worth showing how you can actually go back and see those annotations in the studies. So if you're not overly familiar with nested knowledge, you want to go into a full text. I don't know if you can find one with a full text.
No, these do have full text, but
okay, great. It's just, so you can be reading the article and you can see where it's got it from, and you can check it, and then you can scroll up and down the article and see, actually, is there any data anywhere else in a table that you can still be checking that in the same way you would with a more junior reviewer. I'm going to take some questions now, because we do have quite a few. I'm going to take them in any order at this point. Language, does the AI work best in English? Can I use other languages?
So you can use other languages. I will say all of our validations have been done in English, but we have done a test on Chinese, French, German, and Spanish underlying articles, and the AI was able to extract them. I will note that we did not do a full validation thereof. So the LLM can read other languages, but we can't. As well. So please do full human validation. And if there are people who speak different languages and want to extract as such, please run with it and publish about it. We would love to see that and learn from you.
Okay. Yeah. One more question, I think, or maybe two. What is the recommended approach for extracting follow-up timeframes when studies report them as fixed intervals? For example, 30 or 90 days versus mean or median durations. I would probably do 2 tags.
Or at least 2 columns. So either separate tags or separate columns, because that's the harmonization thing we're talking about. Sorry if that was a little bit too high level, like high level of a concept, and we want to reduce that to practice. The way you address harmonization is same or not same at the column level, right? So a range of time points versus 30, 90, 180, you probably want those as separate columns, just because you're going to have a different instruction and a different extraction. Same with like mean and median. You don't want to throw those into the same column. You want them to be separated out.
Okay, we have got questions, and I think we've got everyone's email addresses. Let's reach out to you and answer your question. We will close, but as I can see people dropping off, just want to thank you for spending this hour.
Can I actually answer two that I saw earlier? They're very important. I just really like these questions.
I'm supposed to be moderating here, so
sorry, no, I'm not moderatable. Will the AI accidentally combine the same study across multiple reports? We have a related reports management system. So if you're worried about duplication of evidence, you can mark studies as related so that you aren't going to duplicate a patient. And then I also saw a question that's more at the high level. It was, hey, you're doing data extraction. Can I do the earlier parts of review in nested knowledge? And if we weren't clear at the start, nested knowledge supports every step in a typical systematic review, from search or importing your searches, screening, dual screening at abstract and full text, extraction, and then, of course, synthesis and export of data. So it is meant to be a full lifecycle software going from beginning to end. So you can see why, Vicki, I really wanted to answer that question.
I was going to jump in with that one, actually.
Okay, amazing.
I was going to finish on that note and say we have had quite a few questions in that line. And yeah, absolutely, it does. It's just today has been focusing on data extraction. Although with that in mind, we are going to have a series of sort of training webinars. We're probably going to do another one in data extraction and maybe templates. Kevin doesn't know this yet, but I've just thought of that one, and I think that would be a really nice one to do. So I would love to do that, and maybe go a little bit more in depth on that. We'll probably be doing some on screening as well soon. So please join for those. I think we're going to close. I'll let you have the final word, Kevin.
I think my only final word will be gratitude to people who have given us the inspiration for nested knowledge, given us feedback on what we've built, and given us guidance on what is responsible AI and systematic review. So thanks to you all for your time. Thanks to the RAISE authors. Thanks to all the great systematic reviewers who have come before us. And I hope that our tool is going to help drive your scientific research. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.